Peace, family. Y'all know who it is. It's Bakari Lumumba back once again, the progenitor of lumumbaspeaks.com, a black empowerment initiative where we believe we can gain a competitive advantage by always betting on black. Back with another video, we're talking about the second day of Kwanzaa and the second principle, Kujichagulia, also known as self-determination. The second principle of Kwanzaa teaches us that we should define ourselves, name ourselves, speak for ourselves, and create for ourselves, and not allow other people to do this for us. I think this is very important. We know as African people, since the beginning of my offer, we have used various forms of self-determination to resist foreign or alien hegemony. And one of the biggest forms we've done that was through African cultural retention. So we know in African American culture, there are numerous forms of African cultural retention. Some of the most famous would be, of course, the wearing of kente cloth. Another form would be, of course, black women, of course, braiding their hair, but also wrapping their hair. Another would be when we see in most religious practices of African Americans or people in the Western world, African people in the Western world, it's the practice of a call and response, right? That comes, of course, from the religious practices in, of course, West Africa, West Central Africa. So we know we've practiced a form of cultural self-determination throughout the years that we've been here in the Western world under the heel of course, the Ma'afa, the African Holocaust of colonialism, imperialism, racism, and slavery. But I think that what is most important, that when we talk about practicing the principle of self-determination, and that I'm really going to share some of the conversations I've had with my children, is that we have to understand that part of being self-determining means that we don't shrink ourselves to make other people feel comfortable. And I'm going to give some examples of what I mean by that. Unfortunately, for example, oftentimes when black people get around people of other racial or ethnic groups, particularly white people, we begin to shrink ourselves to try to make them feel comfortable with our presence. Not only is this extremely problematic and antithetical to the principle of self-determination, Kujichagulia, but it's also representative of an inferiority complex. And of course, as the fathers and mothers of humanity and human civilization, in the sons and daughters of the reaffirmation of our Africanness during the Civil Rights and Black Power movement, we have no responsibility. It is unbecoming for us to shrink ourselves to make others feel comfortable, as of course, as I stated before, we are the fathers and mothers of humanity and human civilization. More importantly, I think it's very important when we talk about practicing self-determination, is that we decide what is in the best interest of black people and what it is that we want to be. We know, unfortunately, many of our young people tend to subscribe to wanting to be an athlete, an entertainer, a rapper, or unfortunately even getting into crime and becoming a miscreant as a way to make a living. We have to push against these negative attributes or frames of reference in which our youth believe that this is what they have to be. We need to let them know that there is dignity and pride in being a doctor, being a lawyer, being a teacher, being a scientist, so on and so forth. And one of the ways that I do that with my children is I have them read about many of their great Afro-Caribbean, of course, African-American ancestors that came before them. And I challenge them to say, well, a black woman has never done this, or a black man has never done that. And they're able to push back against those negative characterizations that I'm making of black history by saying, I read about this myself, and I know that that is not the case. And so I think it's very important that not only do we cherish our children, but we also challenge them as well. And one of the ways that we could do that in thought and practice is by practicing the second principle of Kwanzaa, which of course is Kujichagulia, self-determination. I also believe it's very important when we talk about promoting self-determination that we make sure that we understand that it is our job to shape the world in the manner that we want to see it, right? We know that there are a number of different people throughout the history of the world who have done great things. But we have to understand that we as an African people have done great things as well. When we talk about the 7 ancient wonders of the world, the only ancient wonder of the world that is still standing is the wonder that black people built, and that is, of course, the Great Pyramid in Giza. And so I think it's very important when we talk about the history of African people and how we've shown self-determination through the ages, right, that we can practice that ourselves by restoring the Black Wall Street, right? By promoting black cooperatives, by making sure that when we associate ourselves with educational excellence, that association is black, right? And so, for example, I know there was a time when my children were younger, when they were struggling with reading and writing. You know, when you go to 4th grade, the curriculum is a bit different. And I said to my son and my daughter, how can you struggle with language arts? How can you struggle with reading and writing and you're black and black people created reading and writing? And they said, I didn't think about that. I said you need to tap into your inner Langston Hughes, your inner Zora Neale Hurston, right? I said you all should be budding bibliophiles, right? I mean, we should have our own personal Timbuktu here where every nation and race in the world came to get books, right? And so I think it's very important that when we practice this principle of self-determination, we are making sure that we are associating positive attributes with what it means to be African. Unfortunately, we know that the Harvard implicit bias test stated that nearly 3/4 of black people in this country have a anti-black, pro-white disposition. And unfortunately, we know that can lead to a myriad of issues in terms of how we not only communicate and act towards each other, but also our relationship with ourselves, society, and the world. But one of the ways we can counteract that is by promoting a positive view of African people, a positive view of black people. And Malcolm X talked about this a number of times during his short life, but particularly after he left the Nation of Islam, where he stated, when he was, of course, the founder and creator, co-creator of the Organization of African American Unity, he said that one of the biggest issues in the civil rights movement was not trying to get white people to change how they felt about black people. It was the fact that we should have focused more on changing how we felt about ourselves. And so a part of being self-determining is to share those negative, racist, colonial-minded views of African people, our history, heritage, and culture, and begin to embrace the best of what it means to be African and human in the fullest sense. And we could do that by understanding that we are not only the fathers and mothers of humanity, but of the sciences as well, of medicine, of agriculture, of mathematics, etc. And as a result, we should be the ones who are making sure that we are seated in the first seat when it comes to being valedictorians or salutatorians and gaining academic honors. And we know that if we put our mind to it, we can excel in any endeavor that we choose to. And so I think it's very important that we don't allow the dominant society to pigeonhole us into endeavors or industries or careers that are going to be dominated by others. And so a great example, I would believe, of a contemporary form of African-American self-determination is, I believe, Brother Travis Hunter, who flipped from Florida State, the #1 football player in the nation, who flipped from Florida State to go to Jackson State University. That's an example of what? African or black self-determination, deciding that, hey, I'm the #1 football player in the country, and I'm going to take my talents to a HBCU and make sure that my people benefit from my athletic talent, not only on the field, but also understanding that the role that his talent can play in not only boosting the not only academic as well as athletic profile of the university, but the revenue that could be gained from that as well. So today is day 2 of Kwanzaa. Just want to get on here very quickly and make sure that I made a video about Kujichagulia, self-determination. And I do also want to say that part of being self-determined is pushing back against people speaking negatively or speaking ill about Kwanzaa. I had a conversation, unfortunately, with someone today where they were talking about Kwanzaa was created by a white man. Not true. And so I had to push back on that. They talked about, well, Kwanzaa is an African holiday. I said, no one ever claimed that it was. It's an African-inspired holiday. Just as you have in Brazil and many parts of Central America and even the West Indies, they have carnivals, which are festivals and traditions that are inspired based on African history, heritage, and culture. And as we all know, there are several African-inspired religions here in the Western world, such as Rastafari, Santeria, and of course Voodoo or Badum, based on whatever pronunciation you would like to use. And so we have to make sure we push back against these reductive and negative characterizations of not only who we are as a people, but of our cultural celebrations as well. Because we know good and well that a person, when I speak ill of Hanukkah, we know Hanukkah is not a religious holiday, it is a cultural holiday in which Jewish people are seeking to reaffirm who they were as a people, as a distinct people who have their own history, heritage, and culture during the time they were facing colonization by the Roman Empire. And so I think it's very important that we make sure that we are self-determined in everything that we do and make sure that this is a principle that we practice heading into the new year, 24/7, 365. So make sure you hit the subscribe and like button. Until next time, peace.